Hallo aus Berlin.
Hallo aus der US-Hauptstadt Washington.
Hey.
Servus und Hallo aus Wien.
Ja, hallo.
Goedemiddag in Nederland.
Bonjour aus Senegal.
Γεια σας, χαίρετε, καλημέρα.
Ich bin Anne Dieckhoff, ich bin Korrespondentin für die nordischen Länder und lebe in Schweden.
Ich bin der Valhall Klaassen und ich grüße euch alle sehr herzlich aus der Hauptstadt der Ukraine, aus Kiew.
Aus Athen berichtet für die Taz Ferdi Pazoglou.
Aus Tunis, für die Taz.
Marhaba und Shalom aus Israel und Palästina auf dem Weg nach Berlin.
Fernverbindung. Der Auslandspodcast der Taz.
Ja, guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Ich erlaube mir, die ersten Worte auf Deutsch zu sprechen, bevor wir auf Englisch übergehen. Ich freue mich, Sie zu unserer Veranstaltung zu begrüßen, die wir in Kooperation mit der Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung machen. Mein Name ist Barbara Oertel. Ich bin eine der zwei Leiterinnen der Auslandsredaktion der Taz. Was Sie gerade gesehen haben, war so eine kleine Werbung für unseren neuen Podcast, den wir haben, wo unsere Korrespondenten aus verschiedenen Ländern über Recherchen und so weiter berichten. Und genau, und ich würde jetzt auf Englisch übergehen. Hello, I'm very grateful that you are here, 3 persons from Montenegro, and I would like to present you to our public. Next to me, it was not so easy to do not confront Ivan Vukovic and Ivan Vujovic, but I think I get it right. So next to me, it's Ivan Vukovic. He is a deputy in the Montenegrin parliament, and he is working in the Committee for European Integration. And before his activities as deputy, he was mayor of Podgorica. Then it's very easy, no risk to confront. It's Daliborka Uljarević, and she is from the NGO sector. It's very interesting, not only politicians here in this evening. And as far as I understood, it's a kind of NGO who is working to inform the public, and it's, maybe it sounds a little bit strange in English, I do not know, a kind of civic education, which is very important. And last but not least, Ivan Vujovic. And as I learned, he is also a deputy of the European Alliance in the parliament, but maybe you could then a little bit explain after the elections, the parliamentary elections in 23, it's not so easy. So last but not least, Konstantin Groll from the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and before we'll start the discussion, I would like him to say a few words, because the subject, it's, one of my colleagues said, Montenegro, why Montenegro? And when I told to my colleagues, I went to Podgorica 2 weeks ago, there were 2 journalists who asked me, what the hell is Podgorica? So I would like to ask you, Mr. Groll, why Montenegro? As a subject for our discussion.
So thank you very much for coming. We at the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung are very glad to have these 3 experts from Montenegro here today. So why Montenegro? As you might know, there's this new hot talk in Brussels and all over Europe about accession, EU accession. And Montenegro is named as one of the front runners of this accession process, and it is assumed by the commissions to be Montenegro to being part in 2028, if I'm right. But at the same time, we think that in the public discussion in Germany, there's actually not a lot of knowledge what is going on in Montenegro, how this accession process is turning out in the country. and to inform the public, to foster the debate about this. It's very important to have somebody from Montenegro to tell us what is going on, and that's why we are very grateful to have you here, and I hope for us to have a very good discussion. Thank you very much, and thank you very much as well to Taz for this very nice setting of the talk, and have a great talk. Thank you.
Okay, great setting. I hope we can talk about it after we finish the discussion. So, as you already mentioned, my impression is if it's not expert or people who are somehow related to the region, the knowledge is very low concerning Montenegro. And that's why I decided, before we go into details or political fields or something like that, I would like to ask all of you to tell 3 sentences, maybe for what is Montenegro for you. It's not unexpected. They were already informed before this.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us here. It is a real pleasure. So I'd like to thank to Taz and our friends from Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, and I hope you find it useful, provided that you're interested in the political situation in Montenegro and the region of the Western Balkans. So we've agreed that we should try to keep this first part of the talk as short as possible, so as to open up the floor to the public, and maybe through Q&A session provide more information about whatever you might be interested in. So Montenegro is one of the oldest countries in Europe, probably one of the less known countries in Europe. I mean, given that there are journalists who question the name of our capital city, which I happen to be a mayor of in the previous period. I mean, that's interesting. It's also one of the most beautiful places in Europe, I think, and definitely one of the most complicated, politically complicated countries in Europe, and that's something that I guess we'll talk about tonight. Yeah.
Hello from my side. Also, it's very difficult to put Montenegro in these few sentences, especially taking into the account that we do have a mixed audience, both of those who I don't know to what extent are familiar and those whom I know that are very familiar with Montenegro. But in shortest, I would say that Montenegro is a small country with stunning or breathtaking beauty and endless potential, burdened with chronic political dysfunction. We are marking in a couple of the weeks 20 years of the renewal of the independence. It's been much older state. And as a citizen, I would say it's a paradise with the problem of the bad governance, which keeps it away to be already a part of the EU where you are, and we are hoping to overcome that.
Well, trying to sum up what is Montenegro, I'll be very, very brief. Montenegro, in my opinion, I may be subjective, is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. It is the country.
Could you put the mic on?
It is the country in the Mediterranean country, is the country with long-lasting statehood, has always been throughout history symbol of liberty, symbol of freedom. And Montenegro is what is very specific and very important for the region, having in mind its recent past, symbol of multiculturalism and multi-ethnic, multi-religious country with harmony between different ethnicities and religious groups. Thank you.
Thank you. As it was already mentioned, our subject is Montenegro as a front runner if it comes to enlargement of the EU. Maybe you wonder because, on the other hand, we talk about fatigue, reforms of the European Union. And the slogan, who is present everywhere, when I went to Podgorica 2 weeks ago, it's 28 by 28. So that means that the front runner, the so-called front runner, Montenegro, could or should maybe become a member of the European Union already in 28. So my first question would be, it's maybe not simple, but do you think, because the expectations are huge, it was my impression, but maybe you have another opinion about that, but interesting to know, is it realistic in your opinion? Maybe, again, you make a round.
You're right. The expectations are pretty high in Montenegro when it comes to the possibility for the country to become the next EU member state. Our government actually has come up with a slogan 28 by 28. If it happens, it will be great, because we think that with all of its challenges and difficulties and the reforms that have to be done in terms of functioning of the system, the European Union is by far the best choice that a small multi-ethnic country in the middle of the turbulent Western Balkan region can make. Perhaps other countries have a luxury to decide whether to join or to stay out of the EU. Think about Iceland. Iceland will soon have referendum on the EU membership. Think about Norway. Think about Switzerland. But when you live in the Balkans, you don't have that much choice. So for us, getting to the EU is probably the only long-term insurance policy, so to speak, that guarantees political development, democratic development, economic prosperity for our citizens. So that's why we hope that either by the year of 2028, which to my understanding might be a bit too optimistic, or by the end of the decade, which I will be more than happy with, Montenegro might actually become the next EU member state. You mentioned, or someone mentioned, that this year we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the renewal of state independence of Montenegro. We had a referendum on independence in 2006, and most of the people decided that we should live in an independent state of Montenegro. I'd like to remind you, given that we're in Berlin, I think it's appropriate that back in 1878, which is the year of the Berlin Congress, Montenegro was first recognized as an independent state in Europe. So back then there were, I think, 25 independent states in Europe, so something that we're very proud of. So we managed to renew our state independence in 2006 after living for nearly a century in different political arrangements called Yugoslavia. So we renewed our state independence with the idea to make Montenegro an EU member state, a NATO member state. We've succeeded back in the days, the party that I represent and my colleague, who almost has the same name, hence the confusion, we managed to achieve this first historic goal, which is to make Montenegro NATO member state. And it's extremely important to make sure that we are under this umbrella, given that the region is constantly exposed to different kinds of influences, malign influences from Russia and elsewhere. We can talk about it tonight. So NATO was by far the best choice we can make. The next big goal was to join the EU. So we initiated the accession talks in 2012. By the time there was a change in power, which is 6 years ago, we've opened all the negotiation chapters. We closed 3, and then the process moved on. And ever since, acting from the opposition, we've supported every decision that brings Montenegro close to the EU, hoping that this government or the next government may finish this job, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who gets the medal. What matters is that our citizens get better future, and the better future they will get if we become a member state of the European Union. Yeah.
The question was, if I understood, whether 28 is a feasible date for our membership. At this point, I don't think it's a realistic one. Our government is very dedicated to slogans and PR, and that's quite easy. It's much more difficult to make a content-wise roadmap and to be on a daily basis dedicated to fulfilling these tasks, and this is actually missing. We are missing a track record. We are almost in the middle of the 2026 with 19 more negotiation chapters which are supposed to be closed by the end of the year. I think that it's not possible even of the most fast track, which doesn't mean that Montenegro will not be the next EU member state, but this will be probably prolonged, and we can only hope that the favorable geopolitical context will be still there, and that will make it maybe in a year or two more. What I want to also underline is that the dates are one thing. They may be good sometimes or popular for communication with certain target groups, but what really makes the change is introduction of the values and standards, and this is actually quite lacking.
Well, I don't know if I'm heard, yeah? Yes, okay. Well, it's when it comes to the issue of joining the European Union, for my party, from the party of similar affiliation, it is without any doubt historical goal. After renewal of independence that we led together with our coalition partner from DPS, with joining the NATO, with after adoption of civic constitution in the Balkans, it's not easy to establish civic state. I said in the beginning that Montenegro has been, I hope it will still remain, the symbol of multiculturalism in Europe, multiculturalism in the Balkans, and multi-ethnic and multi-religious harmony. After we opened accession talks, and after we opened and closed, opened all chapters and closed few chapters, today we are finding ourselves, let's say, in much better political context when it comes to the approach from European Union compared to what we had a few years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when we had that kind of enlargement fatigue. It was called enlargement fatigue. Today we had this, or I would like to see it in that way, some kind of revived enthusiasm when it comes to the policy of enlargement. But we have this window of opportunity. This window of opportunity is more open, especially since 2022, after Russian aggression in Ukraine. And it's up to us whether we will be able to achieve our domestic homework. I'm afraid that what Daliborka said, this slogan 28 to 28, we are full of propagandistic approach in Montenegro by actual government and ruling coalition. I think it's much more of speaking and much more of propaganda, much more than real and feasible and concrete reforms that we have. I think that we have to do and we have to show our best. We as an opposition, also until now, we did everything to support this project because we regard it as its own project, because we initiated that project. We are for EU, whether we are in the government or in the opposition, it doesn't matter. We behaved as politically responsible opposition all the time. Our government and our ruling coalition, in my opinion, is trying to manipulate to some extent with this process, to misuse this process, and trying to condemn the opposition parties when opposition parties are criticizing bad ideas, bad decisions, bad laws that are coming from the ruling coalition. So there are lots of work ahead of us. We have some expectations by the ruling coalition that we could close the chapters until the or the end of this year or the first half of the next year. How realistic it will be, I don't know. We are looking forward for that, but we have also to have in mind that it's just first half of the process. After that, we have ratification. We have to have political decision, positive political decision by the countries, members of the EU. So there are lots of job ahead of us. We must be optimistic. We living in the Western Balkan, we have to be optimistic because otherwise we could not survive all of this that happened especially in our recent past. But we'll do our best when it comes to opposition, and our Social Democratic Party of Socialists, I can freely speak also on their behalf in this sense. We'll do our best. It's mostly up to our government, which is showing many signs of treating this issue as not inclusive one. Not inclusive one, because you have many examples where they are trying and they're managing to exclude the opposition from the process. We had also some statements from some state functionaries, doesn't matter who it is, in a moment when opposition raised their voices and critics about some I would say scandalous law that we adopted. Okay, they said, okay, we can do this job even without opposition. We don't need opposition for all this work. I'm trying to paraphrase that. It's not a good approach. This has to be European integration process, has to be the process of the all, is the process of all the society. It's not the process of one majority or one government structure. It has to be a process in which we will involve both government, opposition, and especially civil sector, which has been for the years maybe the best element, with exemptions also, but the best substance of Montenegrin political and social landscape, and excluding both opposition and civil sector from the process is something that is completely unacceptable.
Okay, I will step by step. I will go step by step maybe. I would like, maybe you could, or you too, a little bit explain the situation in the society. You already mentioned multiculturalism. For those maybe who are not very familiar, what can be, is it a very polarized society? How does it match together, different groups and so on? Maybe to have a background, it would be interesting to know a little bit about it.
Well, on the one hand, we are very proud of the multi-ethnic character of the Montenegrin society. One could say that it is the only genuinely multi-ethnic democracy functioning in the Western Balkans, where people of different nationalities and religions don't coexist. They don't live side by side, but they live together. And it's been the case for generations. And that is probably the biggest quality of this relatively small community, right? People still don't care, predominantly. They don't care about whether you're Orthodox or Catholic or Muslim or Montenegrin, Serb, Bosniak, Albanian, as long as you're a good citizen. So that is the concept that we have tried to solidify following the renewal of Montenegrin independence in 2006. At the same time, it's not easy to preserve this concept, bearing in mind what kind of region do we live in. Let's not forget that the socialist Yugoslavia, the country that by many accounts was far more progressive, more liberal, more advanced, more developed than the rest of the Central Eastern Europe lager, fell apart in the most tragic way that Europe remembers, and more than 100,000 people lost their lives because of the issues related to identity. Not economy, not politics per se, but identity and nationalism. So very often when we hear stories about the rise of extreme right-wing parties in places like Germany, France, Austria, for us it's kind of déjà vu, because we got this experience firsthand, and we know what you're up against at the moment. It's the same kind of rhetoric. It's the same old story that is being repeated in different parts of Europe every once in a while. We are proud, as I said, on the one hand, of this multi-ethnic democracy. At the same time, we are aware that it's very vulnerable, that Montenegro, as a very small country, it's the smallest country of the region, is heavily exposed to different kinds of influences. Political influences that do not necessarily share our understanding of the way society should be organized, right? So what we think of as natural, as the only Montenegro that we would like to live in, they think of as foreign. They think of as something that should be cast away at some point. So there are a lot of people in the region, and there are some in Montenegro, and unfortunately there are some in the government of Montenegro at the moment, who think that Montenegro should be reorganized based on the national and ethnic principle. Something along the lines of what we have nowadays in Bosnia and Herzegovina, right? So there's typically post-conflict political arrangements whereby people live separated pretty much from each other, and then you have some kind of cooperation at the level of elites. So this is how they envision Montenegro's future. So we would have Montenegrin camp and Serb camp and Bosnia camp and Albanian camp, and somehow we should define modus operandi. But no, we don't want to live in this country, okay? So we want to preserve what we have. It's not easy, again, because of these influences. And actually the only way, in my view, to avoid this kind of scenario is to get into the EU. Because getting into the EU will serve as some kind of a safeguard against these influences, because people will then be dedicated to a greater extent to practical issues, they will feel the benefits of joining the EU, and they will understand how important it is for them, their families, the close ones, to preserve what we have in Montenegro. So we're very proud of this. I also like to mention that during the times of wars in former Yugoslavia, unfortunately, you know our recent political history, Montenegro is the only former Yugoslav republic that didn't have a war on soil. So we managed to stick together. We managed to survive. In addition, when there was a NATO campaign against the regime of Slobodan Milošević in 1999, and at the same time, the ethnic cleansing campaign organized by Milošević in Kosovo, more than 120,000 Kosovo Albanians came to Montenegro. So Montenegro opened its borders for these people to save their lives. So at the moment, 20% of people living in Montenegro were refugees, right? I'm mentioning this with a good purpose, because you have something, you remember something similar from 15 years ago when the war started in Syria and such. So there are a lot of qualities about this political community. There's a lot of humanity that lives there. But there are a lot of risks that we need to keep in mind, and that's why we've been fighting for the European future, and that's why we feel so frustrated when we see the lack of genuine interest and dedication on the side of our government. Because, you know, posting a slogan on an airplane is not enough. It might be a good PR trick, but it's not enough. You need to work day and night. You need to keep coming to Brussels. You need to keep coming to Paris in particular, to The Hague, to explain to our European friends why should they care about a small country of 620,000 people becoming the next EU member state.
Do you would like to add something?
I have a slightly different opinion. It's a hard question, by the way, because it's if you would ask citizens throughout Montenegro, go to do the vox pops and put them and basically ask them whether they think that Montenegro is a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society, a large majority, probably about 80% of them, would respond yes. And this is at least what our empirical research are indicating. But if you actually go a bit deeper, layers of that multiculturalism are changing. And I will just use two data from these researches from the last couple of the years. And I think that has dramatically changed in recent period. We ask citizens whether they would mind if their partner is of a different ethnicity. And over 55% of them said yes, they would actually take that as a very important thing. And more than 60% of them would not like to have a partner of different religion. I think that these data are more, excuse me? Would not. So I think that these data are more relevant. They are very indicative, and I think that they should be somehow addressed. They are also the consequences of some of the turmoils that we passed. In recent period, Montenegro is today more traditional, more religious-based than it used to be 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. Because if you would ask me maybe a decade or 2 decades ago whether this is the religious society, we said no, it's least religious society compared maybe to the other countries from the former Yugoslavia or wider. Today is different. I mean, we did have certain influences. I don't think that they were good throughout these years, primarily through the Serbian Orthodox Church work on the field, which is a part of this concept of the Serbian world. And it is not only a religious organization, it's actually primarily a political organization, which led to this polarization. And we are a civic state on a paper, but I'm sorry to say that we do have some of the municipalities in Montenegro which are the state in the state. We have this municipality on the north, Pljevlja, where the mayor is not celebrating Montenegrin national holidays, but Serbian ones. He's putting Serbian flags throughout the city on the buildings of the local institutions. Even has mentioned some of the people in the government who do not take Montenegro as their own state. I mean, we do have people on the highest position who are actually looking towards Serbia, and even some of the MPs, I'm sorry to say, who are looking to Bosnia and etc. as their major state, and like this is an extra state. So it's very, very complicated, very sensitive situation. It is something which has been imported, or it was exported to us as a part of the attempt to politically engineer the process in the country on the most sensitive and most dangerous base. It's identity-based. So, I mean, this is not part of the criteria. This is not part of the benchmarks on the way to the EU, but it's tremendously important. And I will just close this to try to illustrate how deep the problem is. As the organization, we are also having projects dealing with the peer violence. A lot of the cases of the peer violence, and I'm talking about elementary and high school, is also based on these ethnic and religious differences. And you can imagine all the set of the differences that peer violence is actually happening. And if you take this part as one of the one set of the reasons, you would understand how actually it went into different aspects of the society. And finally, our youth is becoming more radical. They are becoming more also, let's say, divisive in these things. I was shocked with one of the research that we did, like trying to see the perceptions and convictions of the youth in Montenegro, when we asked them, for instance, what are the criteria when you're choosing your partner? And I mean, we were actually asking that population up to 20 or 22 years. And the second criteria was religion. I mean, when I was these years, I was not even thinking in any way about anybody's religion. This was not an issue. I mean, we didn't even know who is which religion. Sorry to giving a little bit darker picture, but I think we need to talk about the problems and not to put them into the carpet and try to really address them in a meaningful way in order to really solve them, because let us not to forget that these things have been put far too much under the carpet in the former Yugoslavia, and they led to the huge problems. And one thing, Montenegro has not been officially in the wars in the 90s, but war crimes have been happening at the territory of Montenegro, and people from Montenegro have been going and doing war crimes in the countries around. So we need to also take that into the account.
I would like to ask you to even not to make the picture darker, but maybe not brighter. We talk about values, rule of law, such kind of stuff, democracy. So I was a little shocked when you said, okay, the government is exclusive. I would like to have maybe one example to illustrate the problem between government and opposition, because I think it's interesting. Do you have an example to explain what do you mean? A little bit more concrete.
Okay. I wanted to rely to have a follow up on what Daliborka with reasons said, and just I'll answer your question. I think it's very important. She has right, and I just want to escape and to avoid the misunderstanding of what we said in the beginning. Montenegro is still among all the other countries from the Western Balkan, let's say, symbol of multiculturalism and multi-ethnic harmony, but these concepts is at great risk. When did it happen to be at high risk? After political changes in 2020. Because the core concept, the essential idea, the basic idea of these political changes, okay, one government or in many forms, there is some kind of monopolistic position of some party or some parties. Okay, it's good to have changing of the power. It's welcome in every democratic society. But on what basic concept this kind of the political change has happened? On the concept, especially on the concept of demolition and devastation of the civic society and civic-based concept in the constitutional system and in the state. You know, that is the kind of alternative, whether we will be a civic-based state or we will be ethnic-based state, like some of the political actors from the actual government are advocating and have been advocated as an idea for whole their political period of their political existence. You know, they want to create, as opposed of having the state of citizens, as we have now, the state of nations, or the state of one nation, as we have in Bosnia, as Ivan said. So instead of having the role model of Montenegro transferred to Bosnia and imposed in Bosnia, we are having more and more the role model of Bosnia being imposed to Montenegro. The country in which we will have these different ethnic blocks or ethnic structures. We will have Serbian, Bosniak and Croats in Bosnia. We will have in Montenegro, Montenegrin, Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, Albanians, etc., etc. This is I would say the main political and social battlefield that is being in place in Montenegro these days or these months or these years, and it has so much to do with European integration as well, because state of nations in the Balkans especially is getting back to the 90s. We know what happened in the 90s. It was everything contrary to the integration processes. It was miles away from that. It was getting back to the 19th century. And these political forces, not openly, because they cannot do openly, because it's pragmatic way of thinking, of behaving today in the political stage. They will not say that they're against EU, at the Europoly for this concept, but we know that they are for this, and they do everything on the ground to impose this concept. That's why we have more prejudices, more ethnic divisions, more religious divisions, what Daliborka said, because they are doing frequently surveys, and they know. I didn't want to sound like someone who says that it's ideal. No, it's getting worse. It's still better than, and we fight to preserve that. But that is the main battle in the social sphere, because battle in Montenegro in the social sphere, not in the political, where everybody will say, yes, we are for EU, and okay, what does it mean? On the ground, it means something completely different. When you ask me about exclusiveness of the opposition, we could mention many examples. For example, these two, okay, let's refer to these two. They adopted recently two scandalous, I called it Stalinistic laws on internal affairs and Agency for National Security, in which they practically, you know, they totally politicized the institutions. They practically enabled the National Security Agency to monitor people without any kind of the control, without any kind of the scrutiny, without any kind of the judicial control. So it was a big step back, and even European Commission said, but they said, okay, we'll monitor it, which is false, which is a wrong approach. You cannot monitor something that is initially bad. It's nonsense. But okay, and on the occasion of this example, which is the latest one, people from government said, because opposition criticized that and said that opposition said that it will practically see how to react in the future about having consensuses and being constructive with the government. They said, okay, we can do our job without opposition. Opposition doesn't have to be the part of the process. And that was the last, but many other examples we could mention. Everything they do shows that, not only exclusion of opposition, exclusion of civic sector. You know, people, Daliborka is much more competent about that to say, because she's monitoring this process day to day regarding this phenomena. And it's visible, you know, it's so visible that they behave, you know what's the basic concept when they took over the power in 2020, this new political elite, let's say so. They see the power as a way to do whatever it is in their party's interest, regardless of the law, regardless of the constitution, regardless of the standards, regardless of the values. Because they say, one of them also said that on the one occasion, okay, we have majority in the parliament, we can do whatever we want. That's I'm just trying to describe and to make it clear to you what kind of the political culture there is in the parts of the Montenegrin ruling majority. So if our governments, or before 2020 was ruling for, I don't know, my party was ruling for 60-70 years, his party was ruling for maybe 30 years or whatever. Okay, now we can. It's up to us to rule the next 30 years without any kind of the control, you know.
I would like just to add something, because Daliborka, as someone whose organization is conducting these the research and analysis regularly, scrutinizing these the political trends and the way society is changing. I think there's one very important fact to keep in mind, which has to do with the European integration process. We must not forget that the last time the EU expanded was 2013. So Croatia joined the European Union 13 years ago. 10 years earlier, there was a summit in Thessaloniki in Greece, on the occasion of which European integration was promised to the region as a whole. And ever since Slovenia joined in 2004, and Croatia joined in 2013, and that was about it. In the following period, the EU nearly completely lost interest in the enlargement, okay? Remember what was going on there. We had this massive financial economic crisis starting in 2008, then a migration crisis starting after 2011, then there was Brexit, then there were problems with Poland, and Hungary, and Slovakia, right? So there was no focus on the region. We still clearly remember the then president of the European Commission, the guy called Jean-Claude Juncker, maybe you remember his name, the former Minister of Finance and the former Prime Minister of Luxembourg. So in 2014, he said, there won't be any enlargement anytime soon. Factually, he was right, because not a single candidate country was ready to join anytime soon. But politically, that was the worst kind of message you could send to those poor people in the Balkans, hoping that there might be some European future lying ahead. And just imagine, in this kind of geopolitical vacuum, when you're left on the European periphery with no interest on the side of the EU to have you, with the very low living standards, right? Today in Germany, according to the latest polls, we have the extreme right-wing parties polling at 26, 7, 8%. Germany is a rich country, right? It is possible to spread this kind of propaganda in such a rich, democratically consolidated country such as Germany. Imagine the negative impact of similar things in a region where the average salary back in the days was 150 euros, where the unemployment rate stood at 25%, when the youth unemployment rate stood at 50%. With that kind of political past, and you leave the region unattended. And what happens then? You have other great powers stepping in, because in global politics, there's no vacuum. There's never vacuum, right? And the lack of interest on the side of the EU was used, among others, by the Russian Federation. So the Russians stepped in, spreading their malign influence in various forms, media, security, money, politics, you name it. And nowadays, that influence is much bigger and much stronger than 15 years ago, paradoxically speaking. And that is something that the EU leadership has to have in mind, and that is why it's so fundamentally important that we have the change of attitude, in Brussels at least. Unfortunately, what took for this change of attitude to take place was the beginning of the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. Only then people realized why the enlargement was so important and why having the Western Balkans in at some point was so important. That the enlargement was not administrative, technical process, but political and geopolitical process.
Okay, I wanted to ask about Serbian and Russian influence. I won't, because there are many other aspects, and I would like to give you the possibility for questions. But you said that the EU could be a kind of insurance. What makes you so sure that all the risk we mentioned here could be really counterbalanced by the EU? You have Radev now in Bulgaria. Okay, Orban has gone, but I mean, we have, as far as I understood, you have some disputes with Croatia. And I would not say that we have no enlargement fatigue in Europe. So for me, it was interesting that you were talking about an insurance. I understand why. But are there not really risks? We do not know what will be in France after the next elections. So we're talking about nationalism and so on. So what is your opinion about it? Who wants?
I remember I did my PhD studies in Budapest at Central European University. It was still in Budapest back in the days. And I started writing my dissertation in 2010. And when I spoke to my supervisor, he asked me about the topic, and I told him that I'd like to write about nationalism, that I'd like to write about hybrid political regimes, semi-authoritarian, the threats to democracy. And he was looking at me in a strange way, says, don't you think it's a little bit passé? Right? 4 years later, when I was finishing my PhD, Orbán government was already pushing the university out of Budapest as a symbol of liberal values that were incompatible, in his view, with true Hungarian identity. And he managed, unfortunately, to push it out, so CEU works in Vienna nowadays. So we're well aware of the changing political climate in Europe. So we know what's happening in France, we know what's happening in Germany, luckily without serious political consequences, and let's hope it to stay this way. We were quite happy to see the situation changing in Hungary. We were happy to see Moldova, although outside of the EU framework, deciding to pursue its European perspective. So we know things can get complicated, but for as long as there is a chance, or the window of opportunity someone mentioned, being open, I think we must feel obliged to do whatever we possibly can to use this historic opportunity. Because you're right, we may not have another one. So if we don't get the work done in our homework within a foreseeable future, and I'm talking about maybe a year from now, a year and a half from now, while this European Commission is still working, and while we have a relatively positive political climate in Europe, we cannot be sure what happens next. Because we have presidential election in France, we have elections coming up in Poland relatively recently, we have elections coming up in Italy, but again, I think it's our duty to make sure that we do our part of job and then present our case to the European public, explaining why would it be so important to have such a small country as the next EU member state. Because again, it's not about 620,000 people living in Montenegro, it's about 15 million people living in the Western Balkans that are hoping about the future European integration of their countries, and it's also about the EU itself, because having new member states would demonstrate the vitality of the enlargement policy, and if you want the European idea as a whole.
Yeah, I have still 2 questions left. I have many more, but if you don't want to ask something, okay, we can still do it. Could you say a few words about what could be the impact? You already started with Montenegro as frontrunner for the region of Western Balkans.
It's equally important for the progressive forces of the Western Balkans that Montenegro proceed on the way to the EU as much as for us as citizens, because we mentioned a couple of the times Serbia and Vučić through different aspects. It would be one of the hardest defeat for him, because he is still trying to present that he is saving Serbia from different kind of attacks from outside and damaging influences, but in fact he's keeping in custody Serbia, whereas, for instance, Montenegro, which is an independent state, used to be also with Serbia, actually is proceeding. And that would be also a strong message to the other citizens that he is the one who should be somehow replaced, and that there is a hope, because Western Balkans really need hope. It's there's far too many promises, far too many lost chances, and it hasn't been black and white. I mean, there have been periods when actually it was about the EU, that EU didn't want it to proceed with the enlargement, and whatever would happen in the Western Balkans would not change the situation. And there were hard conditions, and some of these processes actually did not lead to the advancement of these countries. I will not elaborate more about what happened with the approach towards North Macedonia. has had and will continue to have a lot of the negative consequences. On the other hand, also these countries have had a lot of these simulated reforms, and this has been, of course, seen from Brussels and adequately assessed. So it would have been important that we proceed, even though we have a lot of the deficiencies, which are, of course, to be corrected. But on the other hand, European Union would also benefit from that. It would show it's a living mechanism which is able, regardless all of the problems that it is facing now, to still grow, to absorb the others and to bring some of the new values. And I think it would be, on a wider sense, I mean, globally, a good message. We didn't talk also about Ukraine and the other countries, but I think it would be a strong message. It's only a question how to balance it, to do it in a credible manner. Because it's very important that the process keeps the credibility, that everybody believes that it is merit-based, and that we are transforming as a society, that we are not the same country, that we are keeping behind some of the bad practices and introducing the democratic norms into the society.
Just briefly on this topic, you know, the region of Western Balkan is a small region. It's everything interconnected. And this spillover effect, in this case of Montenegro, positive spillover effect on the other countries that are not in the process to the extent that we are, could be very visible. It could be very, very, I mean, undisputable. Montenegro, you know, is the country and the society that could have never been expressed only by numbers. Our significance and our, let's say, strength has always prevailed our numbers. You know, it's only, somebody could say it's only a small country, 625,000 people, okay. But I'm sure that if Montenegro becomes completely the positive story in this respect, that it would have enormous positive influence, for example, on Serbia and its society. There is interconnection, maybe the strongest between all the other, I mean, comparing to all the other interconnections between other states and nations. It will have strong effect on Serbian public and Serbian citizens, I think, in the same way as it was. I'll just remind you one very good example from our recent past, in late 90s, when we have, let's say, pro-European, after DPS split with Milošević policy and Đukanović, we had pro-European government and pro-Western government in Montenegro, and we had strong support of such government to democratic forces in Serbia during Milošević period. It was late 90s, and these facts significantly contributed to the final fall of Milošević regime. That was the example of positive influence from Montenegro to its neighborhood. Today we have vice versa situation. We have Vučić regime having negative influence on Montenegro and all the other countries in the region. You know, that's the difference between today, nowadays, and 25, 26 years ago, whatever. So this spillover effect is factual. It's evident, and that is one of the reasons. It's not only for the benefit of Montenegro, it's for the benefit of the neighboring countries, for the benefit of all the region, and also what someone said, for the benefit of EU itself. Because if EU is not able to articulate and to incorporate whole the European continent, because the Western Balkan is part of Europe. I mean, we have Croatia on our borders, and they are EU, why can't we be in EU? If EU is not able to do that, then the question is about the capability of EU to become, to be, and to solidify its position as a global political player. You know, if you cannot do that, that's why I said it's not only for the benefit of us, it's for the benefit of all the European Union. It's mutual interest. It's mutual interest.
Okay, are there any questions? We have 25 minutes left. Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the public discourse in Montenegro. We had mentioned before that there is no real public discourse about enlargement in Germany, or not yet. It's an expert discourse so far, I mean, despite our efforts. But what do people in Montenegro kind of aspire from EU accession? I mean, it's generally prosperity and also... But is there also kind of this EU critical discourse of, I don't know, foreign values being imported, like, I don't know, it's, you know, gender ideology or LGBTQI or so on? Is there, you know, is there kind of a line of discourse there?
One of the... Sorry.
Okay, we will collect maybe 3 questions, if you remember. And okay.
Yeah, thank you. My question is regarding multi-ethnic society, but the whole Balkans. The way I personally see it is that too many politicians profit from the situation as it is. They profit from dividing people into ethnic groups, and then you have your share of voters. And the question is, how can this be overcome? Is there, I'm not talking about Montenegro only, but for the whole region, how can this be overcome? Does it take generations, in your opinion, or... Yeah, that's my question. Thanks.
Do we have another one? Yes, we have that. Yes, we have.
Okay. May I ask in German, please? Is this fine? My English is very bad.
I'm not sure we'll get an answer, but yes.
Okay. No, this is not the question. Okay, perfect, thank you. Waffenbesitz im Land, und ich habe gelesen, es ist fast die Hälfte, die Waffen besitzt im Land, und Diplom, das kann man einfach... Also man muss kein Diplom machen, um ein Diplom zu haben. Das ist auch irgendwie möglich im Land. Wie sieht das heute aus? Das ist meine Frage. Waffenbesitz im Land. Ja, ich habe gelesen, dass so fast 240.000 Leute besitzen Waffen. Und das ist fast die Hälfte von den Bewohnern vom Land.
Gospođa ima 2 pitanja. Prvo se odnosi na posjedovanje oružja, koliko građani pročitala negde da ima skoro 240.000, skoro polovina da posjeduje oružje u Crnoj Gori. A drugo je da tiče se diploma, da ne morate da studirate ili da biste dobili, da biste imali zvaničnu diplomu. Tako da, eto, pitanje života.
Okay, first question was a political discourse. Yes.
It's about the political discourse and communication and how the citizens actually perceive that, and if I understood why citizens are actually looking towards the EU. I will start for the last one. I think majority of citizens are looking towards the EU because of the economic reasons. They believe that their living standards will be better, and also they believe that they will be more equal before the law, which is not the case, and that legal certainty is very important. It's important for business, it's important for the general security of people. Values are unfortunately not so highlighted. There is also one research through, I think it was done by University of Rijeka, through one of the EU-funded projects, that only 30%, unfortunately, only 30% of citizens of Montenegro are actually looking towards Europe because of the values. But on the other hand, I mean, without going into the different kind of the long stories. This 30% is actually equal to some of the other numbers when we are talking about the progressive forces, etc. Anyway, how the government is actually very badly communicating this process, very poorly. It's at the very superficial level with these different kind of mottos which may sound appealing, but very often they sound as AI generated as much as their tweets and different kind of the messages. And this is of course not reaching people. This is not having an effect. What is having an effect is the anti-EU narrative, which is quite widespread in recent years, and this is this part of the influences from the outside, primarily from Serbia, through the obscure portals that they have, especially when it comes to the gender issues, LGBTIQ, etc. So they would have these headlines, you really want to go EU, or you see how freak they are with this, or don't you think that the position of the woman should be in the house, to be a housewife, not these things that that they are trying to teach us or preach us from the EU, etc. So there are these kind of the narratives which are trying to say they will actually, EU will jeopardize the pillars of our traditional society, and this is the best that we have. And it is reaching, unfortunately, some of the people. The distances towards the differences are quite high, and we do still have the widespread misogyny, especially against the women in the public sphere. Actually, this is the sort of the raising problem, and the impetus was given also with the social media, which are giving a sense to some people that everything is allowed. And just briefly to the question concerning politicians who are playing on the identity issues and how to stop this. I honestly believe that the EU integration process is the way to stop that, because, and this is why I was always insisting on this merit-based or tangible results, because this is limiting the space for the, let's say, these epic talks on identity or everything, because somebody wants you to deliver. And when you need to deliver, then you are showing how much do you know. And this is bringing me back to the first description of Montenegro, that we are lacking actually this capacity within the politicians because they are not able to deliver. Even when they're talking about EU integration and people who are specifically focused on these issues, if you pose them a couple of the questions, after third or fourth, you will understand that they don't know what they are talking about. They are not even trying to learn about these things. And very shortly, yes, we do have the tradition, and this is coming to the actually point, not everything from the tradition should be kept. And one of these things is this affiliation of Montenegrins towards the weapons. I mean, there is the historical background for that. It's a small country, it's been attacked by different, it was some kind of the, let's say, conviction that people are more safe if they have the weapon, etc. And we had a lot of the actions, including those that the people can actually return the weapon without explaining how they come to that, and just that police will destroy it through different processes, etc. But it is still something which exists, and unfortunately sometimes leading to the negative consequences. And you mentioned an issue which is also very present now in our, let's say, daily discourse about diplomas. And actually, it became quite popular, quite actual with politicians, with the newcomers who came with those qualifications that they could not actually prove, or they could not explain which faculty they have finished, and this is kind of under the light of the public. We as the organization have been actually dealing a lot with that. We were also calling the Ministry of Education to try to bind the ministers and the MPs to publicize their diplomas, because we don't know, I think, for over 40% of people in the government which faculty and where they have finished, and why they are hiding that if there is something not wrong with that. In, let's say, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, one of the status symbols for the politicians was to have an expensive watch. Or afterwards it was about the cars or the security. Now it's about diploma. That you are that you have master degree or PhD, and then when you actually try to scratch and to do some of the research on that, you actually discover that it's a non-existing faculty or that it is sort of the both. And I would like to actually compliment to Ivan Vuković, who has recently also started the initiative with another colleague from another club to actually publicize the diplomas, that all MPs should publicize their diplomas, but I see that the process is going quite slowly. Only a couple of them, including yourself, have publicized that. I mean, you can elaborate, which is indicative. And just finishing with that, I mean, if you don't know the basics of something, how are you going to decide about the quality, what kind of the quality decisions you're going to make? And plus, you are already entering into that sphere in a corruptive manner. And I have reasonable suspicion that your further decision will be also based on the corruption because of that.
You asked about whether it's true that 220,000 Montenegrins own weapons, right? I'm not sure about the exact figure, but I'm quite sure that there are still a lot of people there who own weapons. It's part of the tradition. Montenegrins had been throughout history warriors. That's pretty much the only thing that they did. They fought in order to survive, and miraculously they managed to survive given the size of this community. So we take great pride in our history, but there are some, as Daliborka mentioned, probably negative consequences in terms of the mind formation, right? And to make a little joke, it's actually, I don't. It's actually an anecdote. So during his first term, President Trump, for some strange reason, which is not surprising anymore, I guess, he made a comment about Montenegro. Actually, it was in the context of Montenegro joining NATO. So Montenegro joined NATO in 2017. Trump became president for the first time in 2016. And I was very skeptical about this. He said, well, they're very aggressive people, Montenegrins. And this is a quote, they might actually start a third world war. So your question is not that out of the context, actually. I mean, there are the people who thought about the destructive potential of the 620,000 people. When it comes to your question about nationalism, how do we fight it? I think it's a question for all of us, actually. It's a question for all of us. I told you, I recognize patterns that we've got to know long ago in the Balkans, nowadays spreading across Europe. The good thing in this development, if there is anything good, is that we no longer, or we at least should not think any longer about nationalism as something that is idiosyncratic in that part of Europe. You know, that somehow we are predetermined to fight each other and such. A lot of misconception, even in the 1990s, you know, when people tried to explain the war in Yugoslavia, they say, oh, these are bloodthirsty tribes, you know, they kill each other every 50 years, and you know, there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, it's business as usual. But actually, it's not the case. If you see some of the major political events that took place recently, they clearly demonstrate the potential of nationalism. Think about Brexit, for instance. Not a single economist in the UK said that Britain would be better off outside the EU. There was not a single economic analysis pointing to this direction. Yet again, people led by, you know, Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, nationalistic crap, they decided overwhelmingly to leave the EU. Look at Mr. Trump's political agenda. Is it not some kind of nationalism? Right? Look at what's going on in the most respected, consolidated democracies of Western Europe nowadays. If someone told me, I I did my MA at the University of Leiden back in the days in the Netherlands. If someone told me that in the Netherlands, the most liberal, probably, country of the continental Europe, we may witness the extreme right coming to power one day, I would call him crazy. It was 2007. And we experienced this. Why? Because of nationalism. So I think it's the question for all of us. How do we fight nationalists in our own neighborhood? Right? So don't think about it as something that is some kind of regional specificity. It's here, it's there, and let's not forget another thing. It is predominantly sponsored and encouraged by the same people. 1,500 kilometers west from where we are right now, okay? So if you scratch a little bit deeper and you look at the finances of parties like Rassemblement National or AfD, or similar political formations, you strangely see some links going to Moscow. So there's a hybrid war that is going on all across Europe. We got to know it first, and perhaps the manifestations are a bit more rough or primitive in the Balkans, but essentially, I think we're talking about the same phenomenon.
Just a small joke, it would be mine, but it's similar to what Trump said. If we have 220,000 Montenegrin under arms, we can resonate in the following way. If EU doesn't want to receive us as a member, we can invade the EU. It's that number of people under arms. Joke, naturally. But it is the problem, and it is but I think that things are getting better in this respect also. We cannot say it for this other issue that you, and the other question that you asked about false diploma. It's a phenomenon that has been on the stage from recently, I think, and it's good that we open discussion about that. I personally have never believed before that it's to that extent the problem in Montenegro, and most probably in all the other countries in the region. But it is really the problem about that. So it's good that this idea was launched by Mr. Vukovic and the other MP in the Montenegrin parliament, and we'll see. I'm sure that some of MPs and some of political functionaries in Montenegro will never publish their so-called diploma. It's, for some of them, it's already the public secret that they bought it, or they have it as a false one, or on some wild so-called university. So it's good to disclose this topic.
Are there any other questions?
One of the problems from the view of the EU is the anonymity, I think, Einstimmigkeit in the decisions. And the problem is that a lot of people think they should change this kind of decision, and then it would be easier to integrate Montenegro and the other states. What do you think about this?
I think the EU should change decision-making rules for the sake of the EU's efficiency, first and foremost. Not necessarily because of Montenegro, but that's a clear obstacle on the way towards making EU a credible, authoritative actor on the international political scene in its full capacity. Right? We've witnessed recently that it takes only one member state to effectively block the implementation of very important decisions. Think about the financial aid package for Ukraine. Think about many other instances in which someone from Budapest or Bratislava had different ideas. So I think that we need to finally put an end to this. Those of you who who are students of European integration process will know, the old Luxembourg Compromise from 1966, when Mr. Charles de Gaulle, back then the president of France, he demanded that every decision of importance for a member state had to be supported by all member states. So gradually, luckily, we saw the gradual departure from this principle through the Single European Act and Maastricht and Amsterdam, Nice, Lisbon. But when it comes to major political issues, security and defense, those still require compromise. Those still require consensus. I think it's about time to really start thinking about putting an end to this, because as long as all 27, 28, tomorrow, hopefully, when Montenegro joins, member states need to agree, it is highly unlikely that they will agree, or they will agree in a timely fashion. So if we want to really build the European Union as a union which is bigger than the mere sum of national interests of individual member states, then we need to accept the fact that every once in a while there will be some decisions that perhaps not be thrilling for us, but if we want to think seriously and if we belong to this system, then we will have to obey and we will have to accept the consequences. So in my view, because of the EU, not because of Montenegro and anyone else, but because of the EU, I think we should hope to see this final step being made in the right direction and putting an end to this decision-making practice that's been around for more than 60 years now.
The problem is to abolish this rule. You have.
We need to have.
Yeah, you need the.
It's a vicious circle.
Green light of every member
Yes,
state.
yes.
So okay, another question.
It's back here. It's a rather comment, but also a question. So the comment would be, first of all, I'm very thankful that you put up this perspective of hope that which Montenegro is proposing for all of the Western Balkans, because I really think, well, you're very special in that you have the majority of people and politicians behind the idea to join. This is something which you should be putting more into the focus. And also personally think you have been very dark on your government because they're trying. They're not perfect, definitely, but they're definitely going to try to have. I'm also skeptical for the 28-28. That's probably not realistic. And the question I'm going to ask is very much along the line what the gentleman just asked. I mean, like President Vučić and also Prime Minister of Albania, Rama, had this piece saying they would be willing to give up veto rights, at least for a limited time period, in order to join the European Union. I know your position of your government, but I would be very interested to hear what you think about that. Is that an option from your perspective, as I said, for a limited time to give up these veto rights in order to join the European Union? Is this something you think is feasible?
I don't think it's feasible also according to the treaties. Montenegro did not apply for the second-range membership. I mean, it applied for the fully fledged membership. It passed very complicated process. You know that the also negotiation approach and methodology has been changed in the middle of that, and we are actually we were going for far too long on the most strict approach than any other country. I think it would have been disappointing for people if we would be accepted as a member state without all the rights that the others have. On the other hand, I do understand the background of the proposal of Vučić and Rama, because that would also open a door not to fulfill all of the criteria regarding rule of law, but that they can actually trade off with something which will be beneficial for them. So I don't think that they were actually in that sense trying to say, well, we're going to sacrifice something because of the benefit of the state. I think that they were trying to invest into their own political future and do some mitigation measures if Montenegro is actually a member state before them, to say, okay, we are also there. Because they know that this will affect them, as we said before. But I don't know even how would you in the EU arrange that within the current framework, that one new country is there with different terms compared to the others. Getting back to this qualified majority or unanimous, I don't see it's feasible for long run, because as I said, I mean, it has to be unanimous decision. Plus, even though it's very complicated, I do understand what was the motive for that. It gives enormous credibility. Plus, you have the different states of who feel equal, because they know that they have a leverage, that they have at some point that they can bring that into the focus. It is probably something that should be discussed within the EU, and I think it's a value issue, because all of the decisions which were problematic were actually, in terms of the speed of the voting, were actually based on the obviously different values that some of the member states had.
I just hope that the EU and all member states will stick to the traditional merit-based principle and follow the same rules that were applied to every country that previously joined the European Union. So I really hope that we will see no more of these political experiments. I mean, they were talked about more than being implemented, luckily, but whenever I hear these kinds of concepts, or remember maybe Open Balkan from a few years ago, also advocated by Mr. Vučić and Mr. Rama, suggesting that we can forget about the European integration, so let's try to do something within the region, or Europe in two speeds, or gradual integration. It gives me chills. Because I know that it means that it implies giving up on the European integration. So I'd like to make an appeal to those among you who have some kind of leverage and contact with state officials, that try to incentivize them and motivate them to really stick to the approach that we have right now, which implies basically that as long as you keep on delivering and reforming, you can expect to be rewarded in the form of full-fledged membership. That's the only set of the rules of the game that really makes sense. Everything else would really complicate our lives, and I think would kill the enthusiasm and the hope that you mentioned in the beginning.
Other questions? Okay, maybe I have the last one. I read different articles, and it was said that even the German government and the French government should put more visibly on the agenda Montenegro's efforts as a future EU member. Is it your impression as well? Would you like more support from, for instance, these two countries?
Well, I think that Germany and France, as pillars of European Union, as countries that, if we can, it's not good to make a hierarchy, but it can be said that the pillars of European Union must consider this Montenegrin case not only as a Montenegrin case and the case of policy of enlargement. As I said, they have to regard it as their own geostrategic interest. So in the context and seeing the things in that way, I think they will not miss the target, I think. And in this respect, one of the colleagues asked the question regarding these majorities and the way of voting and reforms. I think it is connected in which way? I think that, generally speaking, the world is changing faster than ever in its history. And my impression is that leadership of European Union countries and so countries of the European Union are moving slower maybe than ever in their recent history. And it's, if we have this kind of discrepancy, if we have so big and so present activities and what is going on the world stage, we know to what extent the world is changing. The European Union as such, as the association of free state, democratic state, has to deal with that and has to be more courageous, has to be more brave, has to make necessary decisions, no matter how difficult they are. I am aware that all these decisions, there are many reforms of European unions, even mentioned starting from 60s, 70s, Maastricht, Copenhagen, Nizza agreement, so on, okay, many of them. But I think it's now the time when some difficult decision has to be made. On the contrary, I think we will lose, European Union, we feel the part, although we are not still the member, but we belong to that. We will lose the momentum, and we will lose we won't be attractive anymore. We will lose this gravity force. We will lose this global race. We won't be global competitive if we don't take necessary decisions. I think that one of these decisions is regarding this veto rights and so on. It has nothing to do with Montenegro. I think that should be comprehensive approach to do something about that in order to make European Union more effective, more efficient. You know, you will not survive if any country looks only its own interests, because each country, even the strongest one and the biggest one, has the interest to be the part of European Union, and their specific weight is much bigger as a member of European Union than to be outside of European Union.
So I have difficult, no question. So great for having you here. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. I got many new ideas, and it was very interesting to have not the perspective of the government, but also the opposition. Yeah, the bar is still open. It's a secret, and if you want to continue. So we have the possibility maybe for half of an hour or something like that.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to wish all the best to Bayern Munich tonight, because they're a dear friend from Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Hvala.